and thank you for joining us today. Welcome to Coffee with Carolyn, a new casual chat brought to you by Go One. We invite you to grab your coffee, settle in, and enjoy a session that will give you insight on how to get more harmony in your life and work. Keep an eye out for future sessions where Carolyn will invite experts to join her for coffee and talk about things that matter to you most, our friends in the HR community. Just some housekeeping items. Feel free to use the Q&A icon to ask questions throughout the webinar. We'll be fielding questions as we go. There's also a chat icon, which can be used more for casual chat and chatting with audience members and Carolyn alike. And just heads up, all attendees are automatically muted. And now on to today's session. Work-life balance is garbage, create life-work harmonies. We are joined by Carolyn Morris, Senior HR Consultant at Go One. Carolyn has a history of working with HR professionals with a focus on communication. She has a master's in strategic communication and works closely with companies in a myriad of industries to create life-work harmonies with their employees and empower them through communication. And now off to you, Carolyn.
Everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you've got your cup of joe ready to go. And we're gonna dive right on in. We're gonna talk about creating our composition with intention and how we are the director and the composer of that. We're gonna talk about silencing the peanut gallery because everybody's got an opinion, but we need to field those appropriately. And we're gonna talk about controlling our controllables. So we'll jump right into composition with intention. And I was with one of my really good friends, Paige. We were getting our pedicures and we were talking about our New Year's resolutions. And she asked me what my New Year's resolutions were. And I replied, I have one resolution, and that is to remove the staccatos from my life. So frequently we have these experiences where we have disconnected, detached, and separate experiences that don't serve us, that aren't really fulfilling. And so, Joanna, if you'll go ahead and you'll play the staccato bit. That is really abrupt, really detached, and we all have those kind of experiences. And sometimes they're not within our control. For example, a few years ago, I found myself in the middle of a very large city, Seoul, South Korea, and it was staccato after staccato after staccato. Delayed flights, lost luggage, hotel was given away, no more rental car. We were toast. I mean, we were trying to get to this event and we had no way of getting there. And so I thought, I need to get some legato notes going on here. So I needed to ask someone for help. And so if you'll go ahead and you'll play that bit, Joanna. That sounds so much better. It feels so much better. I approached this gentleman and I asked him if he happened to speak English, and he did. It was a miracle. It was a Hail Mary. It was awesome. He escorted us to the train station and he helped us figure out all of these logistics that we otherwise wouldn't have been able to do without him. And he all of a sudden started creating these harmonies for us because there were several of us, and we all had different compositions, and we're all trying to merge them together to create this really beautiful composition. And we needed someone else to come in and tie those notes together and to create those harmonies. And so if you'll go ahead and play that harmony bit.
Oops. Oh.
That sounds and feels so much better. So what are the staccatos in your life that you want to remove? Do we really need to have 5 different activities for every single kid every single season? That's up to you. That's totally 100% your choice. What are we willing to take on, and what are we willing to remove? So make sure that you understand that no thank you is actually a complete sentence. Let's bring the no thank you back. I'm all about no thank yous because it addresses the offer, and it addresses that it's not in your wheelhouse right now. It's not in your composition. It's not something that you want right now. And that's okay. That is okay. Make sure to own your no thank you and create the harmonies you want. But inevitably, there's going to be a peanut gallery. Inevitably, there's going to be a peanut gallery. So how do we silence that? We have to be cognizant of who we allow in. Who we allow in will always, always, always have an impact. For example, I was with my boss a few years ago, and we were having a meeting, and he told me mid-meeting, Carolyn, you need to understand that 9 times out of 10, your ideas are going to be rejected. What? That's the worst ratio ever. Like, I have a 90% fail rate? That's lame. So I went back to my office space and I was stewing about it, and I thought, this is wild. Wild. A 10% success rate? Like, why am I even here? What's the point? So I started thinking, well, are my ideas terrible? Do I not add value? And it started to engage a lot of different ideas and notions in my mind. And I had to invoke the thank you for coming mentality, which means there will be people who will have different opinions about what you're doing, and it may not resonate with you. It may not be something that you believe. And I believe that I have great ideas. And so I had to say, thank you for coming. You're excused. The 90% rejection rate, you're excused. So then I go back to my boss the next day after I had obviously been a little miffed. And I said, help me understand this 90% fail rate, because I just don't understand this. And he said, oh my word, that's not what I meant. What I meant to say is you have great ideas, but they may not be for like another 3 to 6 months. So keep them coming. Just know that the implementation may be a little bit different. And that's okay. That's totally okay. So I had to say, thank you for coming. I'm out. That thought's no longer serving me. We either need to let it go or we need to address it. And whatever we choose is going to be fine, because that's our choice. That's our staccato that we're removing or that we're keeping. So what do you want to choose? A next important aspect of silencing the peanut gallery is what I call a personal board of directors. And a personal board of directors is just that. This is not a nonprofit. We don't need to have dozens of people. This is pick your top 2 to 3 people who have been in the trenches with you, who understand you, who want your best interest at hand, and who have shown up and have proven that they show up. I have personally chosen 3 people, and I have sat them down and I said, hey, this is my vision, this is my goal. I really would appreciate if you could help me keep that compass pointing north. This is where I want to go. This is who I want to become. Will you help me get there? Yeah, but you also need to make sure that your personal board of directors can call you on your BS, because there's going to be times where you're going to try and be like, oh, no, that's not true. Oh, those personal board of directors need to call you on it. Make sure that you can have hard conversations. Make sure that you can really engage people so that they can help you. And one of my favorite things is a personal standing ovation. And the idea of a personal standing ovation is just that. It's a personal standing ovation where we are going to celebrate something that we've done in the past few weeks. So if you move your cursor over your screen right now, there's going to be a little chat box that pops up. And we want you to type in something that you have accomplished in the past 2 weeks that you are so pumped that you did. Whatever it is, it could be as big or as small of a victory as you want to share. But we want to recognize you today, because this is what a standing ovation is all about. So Joanne, we'll circle back to that as comments and chats come in. But Joanna, I know that there's a few questions that have popped in, so I'd love to hear some of those questions that our friends have.
Great, thank you, Carolyn. So one question that came through is, I love the idea of thank you, no thank you, but how can I apply that with my boss who seems to pull me in unproductive directions?
Such a good question. There are so many times where we have people that we interact with and they have a ping pong agenda, and it's like over here and over there and left and right and up and down. We need to make sure that we have alignment with our teams. And that could be our personal team, that could be our families, that could be our boss. make sure that we have alignment conversations of, hey, these are the different things that I'm working on. These are the different projects that I have. I want to make sure that I'm hitting the right, that I'm going in the right direction. And I know that we hold different cards. And different cards doesn't mean that they're better. They're just simply different. And so how are we going to make sure that we're hitting the right trajectory? And that comes through an alignment conversation. And your boss may reply and say, hey, I am so thankful that you brought that up, because we've done a little bit of a pivot shift. And this is something that's more critical at this time. And these other projects right now can be on the back burner until this is completed. Great question.
Thank you. One more question. What are some activities tied to rewarding myself in the context of that personal standing ovation?
Oh, I love that question. Everybody is so different and everybody has different motivators and drivers. I personally love to go to the mountains. That is my personal standing ovation. I get to get out and be in nature. That is what I love. But some people may love simply sitting by a fire and reading a book, or they may love going on a long walk in the park, or they may want to go have a night out on the town, or they may just want to have takeout. Whatever your personal standing ovation is, it's yours. Make sure that your personal standing ovation is personal to you. And I can guarantee that at least 98% of the people on this webinar right now are givers. You are givers, and I understand that. You want to give your standing ovation to someone else. You want to give that to a loved one. Make sure this is for you. You need to be celebrated. You're incredible. This is the day. This is Friday. I mean, hot dog. What are you going to do to celebrate your awesomeness today? That's what I'm all about. So, Joanna, I would love to hear some of the personal standing ovations that have come in, some of the celebrations that people are having today.
Yeah, so some of the accomplishments, and like you said, it's Friday, so celebrate these accomplishments. One, I'll use a work example, releasing 30 employees from our company with dignity and grace, giving them as much peace and resolution as possible. On a more personal level, someone said that they baked the perfect chocolate cake to celebrate their husband's graduate degree completion. Big win.
Yes.
And one more work example, putting together promotional training that would have been 1 week long, but took 2 days. Great way to end a Friday.
Okay. That is so across the board, everyone. Like, that is phenomenal. We have really high emotional stakes across the board. I mean, we have people who were let go with dignity. That is in and of itself a huge, huge feat. And that you were able to do that, oh my word. I'm doing a clap for you, my friend. Like, that's incredible. I am so proud of everybody who is honoring themselves today. And what are you going to do today to celebrate that? And maybe it's decompressing of, oh, I just need to go for a long drive. I just need to get out. I need to jam out. I'm going to get myself a Diet Coke, put on some tunes, and rock and roll. Whatever that is, make sure you do that today. Do that today for you. You're incredible. So let's honor that. Let's do that. Our next section is going to be controlling our controllables. And so often we get into sticky situations, and it all comes back to the crucible of communication. If you think about it, all relationships, whether professional or personal, are created, maintained, or destroyed by communication. Communication at its most basic is an exchange of information. So there's always going to be two people involved in a communication setting. And so right now I am the sender and the people listening are the receivers. But there can be a lot of different things going on. There's static, which is external or internal. And so how are we going to still the static? Inevitably, how many of you have been in a meeting and you're nodding your head? I call it the meeting nod, where you're nodding your head and you have no idea what's going on. Absolutely no idea what's going on. Like, oh yeah, great. I'm thinking about dinner. I'm thinking about carpools. I'm thinking about the next email I need to send. There are so many other things going on in our minds that we call that static or we call that noise. So we need to make sure that we still that static, because it can be a rough go, my friends, trying to communicate all of that. The next thing that we do that we control is our boundaries. And boundaries are a framework or a guideline of how people interact with us physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, socially. So how are we going to help people understand what our boundaries are? Especially because we are beings of evolution. We're not the same people we were a year ago, 2 weeks ago, maybe even a day ago. So how are we going to calibrate and let other people know that we've changed and that our boundaries have evolved with us? We need to give real-time feedback at least 80% of the time. 80% of the time we need real-time feedback, because if we don't, we're gonna fester and there's gonna be friction and there's gonna be tension. And it was all because they didn't know. They didn't know. And so we need to make sure that our boundaries are expressed. And that comes down to how are we communicating that? The silent treatment is a form of communication, and it is insanely destructive. Make sure that you use your words. Make sure that you understand what your tone is like. Make sure you understand what your body language is like. Are you gonna wanna go talk to someone who's all like curled up in a ball with their arms folded and they're scowling at you? I'm not. I'm like, whoa, this honey needs a Diet Coke, and then we can have a conversation. Understand the environment, understand the climate that you're in, and that your boundaries change, and so do theirs. And so we're in this constant state of evolution and figuring that all out. Our behavior is so important. We have to own our behavior, because our behavior reflects how we feel about another person, what we think of a situation. And how many of you have heard the adage of treat people how you want to be treated? No, don't do that. Don't do that. Treat people how they want to be treated. Because, for example, let's say someone in your company wins an award and they are the most reserved person possible, and everybody's up there and they're clapping, they're on stage, and they are mortified. Whereas someone who might be sitting right next to them would be eating it up. They'd be like, I'm the best, this is the coolest thing ever. Understand how people work. Understand what motivates them, what drives them. How are we going to treat people how they want to be treated? And it comes back to our communication, to our boundaries, and understanding the behavior. And our attitude is like the cherry on top. We have got to understand that that's the way that we think and feel about someone. Our attitudes make a big difference. For example, if I was to say, hey, Joanna, how you doing, girl? And you responded, I'm fine. Oh, honey's not fine. Honey is not fine. There's something else going on. And so how are we going to address that? How are we really going to help people understand where we're at? And it all comes down to communication. All relationships, whether professional or personal, are created, maintained, or destroyed by communication, and we control that. And so, Joanna, I saw that a few questions have popped in. I'd love to hear some of those. I'd love to tackle that.
Yeah, so we have a great one that really applies to the signs of the times. How do we apply all of this, all the feedback that you're giving, to work from home life and the stress that comes from feeling like we have to be online 100% so our bosses and peers don't think that we are napping or blowing off work?
Let's talk about how we're in a wild ride, okay? Every single person is calibrating. Every single person across the world is calibrating. And so understand, what's your relationship with your boss? Do you have that trust already established? Do you have touch base meetings? What are you willing to do to establish that you both know and you're both on the same page of, I'm not blowing you off. I'm sitting here trying to deal with all of this staccato pandemic going on because that's left, right, and center. Nobody can control that. Nobody. But we can control our communication. We can control how we interact with other people. So what's your method of checking in with your boss? Is that a text message? Is that an email? We have to understand that there are going to be, every single person has a different, people who are single and living alone are going to have a different experience than people who have kids. It's totally different. And if your kids are in school, that's another added element. Or if you have an aging parent that you're taking care of, that's another element. And so establish, have an alignment conversation with your boss of, I understand that this is 100% wild rides right now for everyone. And I want to make sure that you and I are on the same page. Can we get in alignment? What are some things that we can establish that you know that I'm here and that I'm dedicated and that I'm willing to do what it takes to make sure that things move forward in a productive, healthy manner? I would highly suggest an alignment, because being online 100% of the time straight up isn't realistic. Like, it's not. And so what are the realistic expectations that everybody can establish? Goes back to your boundaries. I will check in with you at 12 o'clock every single day, and I will let you know if I have any questions. And trust me that my work is getting done. Do you have that trust? So making sure that, and that in and of itself, establishing that is going to create trust. That's a phenomenal question.
Thank you, Carolyn. That was really helpful. One more question before we move forward is, are there times when you have to be flexible with the boundaries that you mentioned in this slide?
Boundaries are personal. And that's a great question, because there are some boundaries where it is a hard no for this honey. Absolutely no chance am I crossing that boundary. Whereas with other times, I'm willing to be a little bit more malleable, where people know that I turn into a pumpkin at 10 o'clock. I turn into Cinderella at 10 o'clock and not midnight. So am I willing to sacrifice a few hours of sleep so that I can help out with like a friend or a project? What is that? What am I willing to sacrifice? What are my boundaries I'm willing to move just a little bit? And understand that, you know what, my resources are going to be different the next day. And that's okay. So understand, what are your boundaries that you're willing to be flexible with and that you're not willing to be flexible with. And that's going to be totally up to you. Those are personal. And so understand that as you evolve, your boundaries will evolve too. And that's a wonderful part of life, is that we get to evolve, and we get to evolve together.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Absolutely. So we'll talk about our takeaways as we have the last few minutes together. We're just a friendly reminder to own your composition. We are always composing, always composing. Every single day it's going to sound differently. Every single day it's going to be a different melody and a different harmony. And periodically those staccatos are going to beep, bop, boop, bop, right in there. And sometimes we just got to roll with it. And that's okay. That is okay. Welcome to the wild ride of life. But make sure that you understand what you can control and what things are outside of your control. I couldn't control that my flight was delayed, my luggage was lost, my hotel was given away, my rental car was gone. I couldn't control that. But I could control, well, what can I do about it now? Let's move forward with now. Like, let's start creating those legatos, because this honey's looking forward to those harmonies in that event that's coming up. And silencing the peanut gallery is always a wild experience, because everybody has an opinion and everybody thinks their opinion matters, and it does to them. Wonderful. Let them relish in their opinion. That does not mean that it needs to take root into who you are and who you're becoming. It does not mean that you need to hold on to it like an iron vice. It's okay to let it go. And those personal board of directors will help you get to your North Star. They will help you get where you need to go. So make sure you choose them wisely. Make sure you're picky about that. Because the personal board of directors, they're transformative. They have helped me keep my North Star in so many different capacities, professionally and personally, that it is worth the effort to figure out who will be part of your personal board of directors. And make sure you control your controllables. Your communication is 100% yours to own. Every single day, it's yours. And other people have different communication styles. They have different communication abilities, and help them navigate how you communicate. And why not create a harmony in your communication? It's going to be way better. And back to the point of we're in this wild ride in this pandemic. And I heard this quote by Ezra Benson, who said, "The toughest battles we will ever face will be within the silent chambers of our own souls." The toughest battles we will ever face will be within the silent chambers of our own souls. There will be times where people are experiencing staccatos that you will never hear and that you will never see. Let us be kind to each other. Let us lift where we stand. Let us understand that life work harmonies take a lot of effort and a lot of people to make it be fluid and lovely and easy to hear. And there's always going to be staccatos, but we may not hear them or see them from other people. So let us be generous. Let us be generous with ourselves, because again, our resources fluctuate physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially. Everything is always in a state of flux. And are we doing the best we can with the resources we have? Because that is where we get to be generous. Are we doing the best we can with the resources we have? Yeah. Then, heck yeah, I'm going to give myself a standing ovation. I'm going to freaking love my life. But if I'm not, what am I going to do about it? How am I going to change? What staccatos do I need to remove? How am I going to connect some of my notes? How am I going to get those legatos and those harmonies? And it's a phenomenal ride, everyone. And we're doing the best we can with this wild ride. And I hope that some of these tips and tricks were helpful to you. If you're interested in learning more, Go One has phenomenal courses that we can definitely connect you with. And make sure to connect with your CSM. Make sure to contact Go One if you would like more information. We'd be more than happy to help you navigate some of these uncharted waters. But Joanna, I saw that there were a few more questions that we have in the last few minutes that I'd love to touch base on before we peace out.
Great. So let's talk about communication. There's a question around, is the communication, the communication points that you brought up, does it apply to the person communicating or the person being communicated to, or both?
It's always going to be both, because there's always going to be two people to a communication cycle, and we have to own ours. We need to make sure that we are constantly giving feedback, and that feedback could be verbal, body language, tone, volume. If someone's talking really loud and really loud and really loud, then all of a sudden they get really quiet. Like, those are different messages. Those are totally different messages. And that's actually our first language that we learn as kids, is body language. Oh, my little niece knows when she's busted. Oh, because she hears the tone and she's like, oh, yeah, bad move. Okay, noted. And then she'll do it again, of course, right? Like, little kids do that all the time. But so it's always going to be a two-way street, and make sure that you own your lane. You have to own your lane.
Great, thank you. So we have time for one more question. It's around static. Static seems to be everywhere. What if we are constantly miscommunicating and there continues to be friction? What is your advice?
Welcome to human relationships across the board. There's always going to be static. And I personally can understand where you're coming from, because there's been people where I'm like, I feel like I'm being as explicitly clear as humanly possible, and there's still a disconnect. Like, what's happening? So something that I have found really helpful is to ask open-ended questions, and then I ask them to unpack that for me, because inevitably it's going to be surface level, and just say, hey, unpack that a little bit more for me. And then they have self-disclosure. They give a little bit more information, and then call it out. Be like, oh, that's an interesting point. I'd love to learn more about this. Can you go a little deeper for me on this concept? And then you can figure out where there's a disconnect. It might be they're struggling at home. It might be that their kids are battling something really serious. It might be that they have so much stress and it's fogging up all of their headspace. And so how do we get to the root of the disconnect And that's through open-ended questions and going deeper. Unpack that and going deeper are very, very respectful tones that we can always use. And so I know that's a wrap. It's a half-hour mark. And so everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. I wish everybody an awesome Friday. Make sure you get your personal standing ovation in. Cheers.
Thank you, Carolyn.